Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Hi, Reverend LAUGHLIN here. Thanks for joining me today on Talking Heads on the USA TV and Radio Network. We're also on the E360 TV network, Roku, Amazon Fire, and many others. Let me go ahead and get ourselves started today, get my slides looked out there. Okay, there we go. We're doing a deep dive into nutrition. As part of the disclaimer, I've never been part of the medical industry, not a doctor, not in the pharmaceutical fields, nothing in that area. Many years ago, high school, I fell in love with chemistry. I got my first degree in it. I also have 5 total academic degrees, but I didn't get a chance to practice it because I got an invitation to Vietnam. But nowadays, I use my chemistry background to do a deep dive into our bodies and look at the cellular level, what's happening, chemically speaking. What causes this to do that? What caused that to stop happening? What caused that to speed up? And those are the things I'm looking at. And today we'll talk about that in a little bit of detail, because there are certain things that has to happen for this particular molecule to get from this food group or this supplement all the way into this part of the body. And if you understand that particular part, awareness, education, that's what we're here for today. And so that's the part that's going to, I think, really be interesting. We're talking about 3 of my most favorite vitamins today, so it's going to be very, very interesting. Anyway, I look for causes. If you treat a cause, you can fix a problem. If you treat symptoms, you'll always be treating symptoms. But the real damage is you're treating the symptom, but the cause is still continuing to go on. And as always, this presentation is for awareness and education. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump in. Vitamin D. One of my favorite molecules. I've talked on this one at numerous occasions, both on video and live person. Anyway, it's one of the ones that I truly believe in. It's a fat soluble molecule, which means you really need to have food to help it digest a little bit better. It helps our bodies absorb, specifically calcium and phosphorus, because we're talking about bone health. but it's also needed for our brain health, for muscle development, for our immune function, and again with our bones. We have a vitamin D2, ergocalciferol, and the vitamin D3 is cholecalciferol. And the vitamin D2 primarily comes from your plants, and you might find it being added, a synthesized version, into your foods. The vitamin D3 is what we think of as the sunshine vitamin. It's the one that's available for us all out there at all times. But we also can find vitamin D3 in animals and in dairy and a couple other places. Now, D3, when I'm talking about vitamin D in general, I'm talking about D3. D2 is there, it's being used, but for most practical purposes, when I'm talking, let's say I specifically say D2, I'm talking about the D3 particular one. So this particular molecule, this particular vitamin has two primary makeups. And the D3 is formed a little more differently. It's formed from a bacterial, this one here, the vitamin D3, I'm thinking about another one down the road. The vitamin D, as it hits our skin, the UV, we'll get to that in just a minute. Anyway, let's get into, finish up this slide. So vitamin D3 also affects our aging. One of the two primary causes of aging is the erosion of our telomeres at the end of our DNA. So you take a look at that telomere, and certain things will cause it to erode. And when it erodes enough times with enough replications, the cell is dead. Thank you. End of story. But D3 is one of those ones that will actually help you with your aging and your overall good health. It's also needed for your cardiovascular health and many more things. Now, the health industry says you really need 600 to 800 IUs a day. Personally, I think that's absolutely ridiculous. I think a better measure on the absolute bottom end is 5,000. 6,000 to 8,000 a day, I think, will get you to a level. Now, how do you know what is right for you? When I first started doing this on my own, I was having my blood measured for vitamin D, 25 hydroxyvitamin D. It's a blood test for how much D3 is in there. So how much do I need in my body? I'm going to be going into a little more detail, but I wanted to have a minimum of 50, higher 80 nanograms per milliliter. But I wanted that particular range. Why? Because 50 to me is the absolute bottom end of everything. Although nowadays, when you look at some of the literature, they say that should be the upper end. But to me, the upper end is above 100. But if I'm taking, okay, I started taking 2,000 a day, I get a blood test. I take 5,000 a day, I get a blood test. And I could gradually see my vitamin D3 levels creep up a little bit. Nowadays, I take between 10 and 20,000 IUs a day. In the wintertime, when I'm not in the sunshine very much, I'll take 20,000. Summertime, 10 to 15. But depending on how much I'm out in the environment, walking, sunshine, etc. But I want my vitamin D3 levels in my body to be literally around 100, maybe as low as 90. Now, when you get oncologists telling you they want your D3 levels up to help fight cancer or fight any other kind of infection, they're talking above 80. So if I'm using 50 as the absolute bottom level, 80 is pretty high, but not quite double, but 100 is double that particular one. I think I have some more in here. But we get D3 from our sunlight. That's UVB rays. These are the ones that are generally between 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning till early afternoon. Probably it starts decreasing a lot after 3. But it's not the same for everyone, because if I'm living in Seattle, Washington, or I'm living in Miami, Florida, different latitude, the level of UVB, ultraviolet B rays, is going to be different. The color of my skin is going to be different. The age of my skin is going to be different. How many clothes am I wearing? And do I have sunblock on? There's several other factors there. So how much am I absorbing over my body? So if I'm in my bathing suit, I'm laying out at the pool, and I'm in Miami, Florida, and I'm a redhead, I got fairly white skin, I'm going to absorb a lot. If I have a much darker color skin and I'm living in Minneapolis, it's wintertime, it's overcast, snowing, I'm not going to get any at all. But fortunately, there's a lot of supplements and they work. But the sunlight hits our skin, and there's a precursor there. It's called 7-hydrocholesterol. And that particular chemical begins the process of taking that sunlight and changing it into vitamin D, vitamin D3. And it goes to our liver first and then to our kidneys. There's a lot of things that happen in there before it actually gets to the bloodstream. But coming out of the kidneys, you're going to have what's called 25-hydroxyvitamin D. And that's the active form of this particular vitamin. And it's used all over the body. It's an amazing chemical nutrient. The literature used to say anything less than 20 you were deficient. They've, at least in most cases, I still see 20 periodically in some places. They're saying 30 nanograms per milliliter, you're deficient if you're below that. I think the range that they're saying is 30 to 50. I think 50 ought to be the lower end. But 40% worldwide and over 40% in the United States are deficient in vitamin D3. And it's a sunshine vitamin. If you're outside, you're going to have plenty of it. Now, there's a commercial back in the 80s, and some of you might remember, I had somebody drinking milk out of a bottle. And said, milk does a body good, and you can see the little white streak there across their lips. But it implied that drinking milk made your bones stronger. However, it could, but not necessarily. Vitamin D3 is absolutely critical for good bone development and bone strength. My story that I share with people is back in the 90s, mid-90s, I read a book on Atkins. Actually, I read 5 books on Atkins diet. And in that one, I fell in love with the diet. I just thought it was great. Almost no carbs, literally no carbs, fruits and vegetables, dairy, meats, fats, everything that I love was on the diet. Everything I didn't like was off the diet. Well, I like some bread. It was one of the really hard things for me to give up. But I lost a lot of inches, a lot of pounds, kept it off for years. Noticed that I had a little bit of problem with let's say endurance. I could easily run 8 miles every day and not have a problem. When I was on Atkins, I had really ran out of gas in about 2 miles. I see I have a couple questions that are popping up, so maybe we can take a fast look at what those are. For Mark Lee, what do I think of tomatoes and cucumbers is a good way to get vitamins? Absolutely. Any kind of food, Mark, is an excellent way of getting the vitamins that you need into your body. Tomatoes happen to be a unique one for males because we're looking at trying to get the value of that out for our prostate and other things, but you need to have that particular food cooked a little bit in order to get the real lycopene out of it. And another question by Mark Lee, do most people get enough sunlight? I'm actually going to get into that one, and I'm going to talk about sunburn and cancer, so I will be covering those. However, in my story was about 6 years in, I'm leaving Europe, coming back to the United States. I finished up my military career. I took a test, and I had been lifting weights forever. I'm talking about decades, running forever, and easily 5-8 miles a day, several half marathons. Didn't think it. And I got my bone density. I was osteopenia. I absolutely could not believe that everything they told me about exercise, this, that, and whatever, I expected to have super strong bones, but I didn't. So this is a little before I started doing my research to what I'm doing now. But the real story is, how does calcium get into the bones and how does it come out? Well, vitamin D3 is critical for that transformation. So if I'm eating, let's say, a particular cheese that has vitamin D or calcium in it, or leafy green vegetable that has calcium, any food that has calcium in it, or if I'm even just taking a pill, the calcium in and of itself is very difficult to absorb, especially if it's calcium carbonate in a pill form. But from the foods, if I have magnesium already in my body, the magnesium helps the calcium become more bioavailable, more easily absorbed into the blood. So it's in my stomach, magnesium's in my body. Stomach does this little digestive process. As the food is starting to leave my stomach, passes through the duodenum. If, and only if, I have enough vitamin D3, the calcium that is available for my bones will either go into my bloodstream where it can get to the bones, or will go to the toilet. That's only 2 places. So I need my vitamin D3 to get that calcium from what I just ate into my bones. However, and here's a big however, if I don't have enough vitamin K2, and we're going to be talking about that today, I hope, vitamin K2 will look at the calcium and say, okay, let's go to the bones. But if vitamin K2 is missing, the calcium is going to go to your heart valves and arteries. That's not where you want the calcium, because that's the plaque that forms up that becomes a problem. So I need a good form of calcium. The best is from food. I need magnesium. I need vitamin D3, and I need vitamin K2 to get that calcium into my bones. However, now it's in the bones. How does it stay there? Well, this is another problem because Atkins had. Because if I look at my body's pH, in other words, how acidic or how alkaline my body is, that determines on whether that calcium stays in my bones and keeps a nice strong set of bones, or it's leached out of my bones. Well, in my particular case, because I was eating a lot of meat and dairy and fats, I had a very acidic condition for a long period of time. My bones were leached of calcium to maintain the pH of the blood. So now my blood is fine because that's the one that's the major decision maker. It's going to reach out and grab a hold of that calcium. And it doesn't matter what happens to the bone, the blood is going to maintain it. So now my bones are getting weaker. I have osteopenia. But to keep the calcium in the bones, I need an alkaline environment in my body. I need my pH above 7.4. And so when I figure out, well, how do I do that? Fruits and vegetables. Fruits and vegetables will raise the alkalinity in the body. Any kind of carbohydrate, protein, or fat will lower the pH of the blood into an acidic condition. So I need to eat more fruits and vegetables than I do proteins and fats and carbs. And so that's kind of the balancing thing. So if I'm not eating enough of fruits and vegetables, I'm leaching the calcium out as fast as I'm putting it in. So if I know how to get the calcium into my bones, I ought to be taking advantage of being able to keep it there without it becoming a problem later on in life. It doesn't happen overnight. This is something that happens over years. So as I'm looking at what happens if I'm deficient in vitamin D3, and a major portion of the United States is osteoporosis, bone fractures. But the thing is, it's asymptomatic. You do not know you have a deficiency until something happens. If I get too much, it's rare. It's almost, I'm not going to say impossible, but to get over 150 nanograms per milliliter, you end up with a little bit of confusion, pain, nausea. There's a fair amount of them. You can look it up. But again, it's a very, very rare situation. A vitamin D deficiency becomes a problem in our health because it also affects our immune system. We may end up with autoimmune diseases. It's a lot of testimonial evidence out there on multiple sclerosis being one of the deficiencies of vitamin D3. When I look at people with MS, they typically run very, very low on D3. But when you look at some of the things that says, well, I'm taking 100,000 IUs, whatever, of vitamin D3, all of a sudden their symptoms of MS disappear. Again, testimonial, but there are so many testimonies out there. There's something there. Again, talk to your doctor. Don't just go out there and buy some high potency vitamin D3 if you happen to have MS or some other autoimmune disease. But there is a link between vitamin D deficiency and our immune system. A lot of issues with diabetes, protective. The vitamin D3 is very protective of our insulin resistance. So if I have a lot of D3 in me, I'm going to have a lot of a more immune response. It acts as an anti-inflammatory. I was out, I didn't bring my D3 with me, and I was on a trip. I ran into a store, bought some. Open it up, and it's got a really pretty color to the pill. And I turn around and look at it, and it's got an artificial coloring. And I'm thinking to myself, why does vitamin D3 need an artificial coloring? It doesn't. I threw them away. I went ahead and bought another one, but I try to avoid the toxins that are in there, and coloring is part of that. But when I'm looking at the vitamin D3 from the sunlight, and Mark brought up the question just a minute ago, this is where I need to be. If I'm wearing a lot of clothes, if I have a hat on, I'm wearing sunblock, no matter what's out there, I can be out there all day long. I'm not getting good exposure. If all I have is my hands and my face, that's the exposure, and I have makeup or I have some kind of blockage on my face, then I'm defeating the purpose of having the sunburn. Now, I burn very easily. I walk outside and I'm around the pool doing something. It doesn't take 10, 15 minutes. I can feel a light burn. I get in the shower and that hot water is a lot hotter. But the skin cancers, yes, they're a big deal. I've had a lot of basal cells, never a melanoma, but I've had almost every time I go into the dermatologist, which is every 6 months. I've been doing that for decades, since the 80s. Uh, Actinic keratosis, AKs, and they burn those off with liquid nitrogen. But yes, you have to be extra careful. But take a look at how many thousands of years humans have never had knowledge of these skin cancers. Now, obviously, a lot of them died in their 40s and 50s because that was the age. But even when you take a look at the people who used to work out on farms and they're 80, 90 years of age and they're still out there and they don't have a problem with skin issues. They may have a problem with skin weathering, a lot of issues with aging skin, but people adapt over time. Our bodies are self-protective. So there are issues with skin cancer. If you are a redhead, very sensitive skin, wear a hat. I do when I go out walking. If I'm looking to soak up some sunlight and I'm working out in the yard, shorts, t-shirt, thank you very much. Set my alarm. I know I'm not out there too long. Vitamin D3 is best taken with calcium. Your basic vitamins A, B1, and C, phosphorus, choline, and your essential fatty acids. Those are the ones that are going to help you best with that particular vitamin. You jump over here to vitamin E. Vitamin E is 8 different chemicals. They're fat soluble, just like the vitamin D. But you get 4 tocopherols and 4 tocotrienols. You have alpha, beta, gamma, and delta tocopherol and tocotrienol. There's no single food that has all 8 of them in, but your seed oils, your nuts, your fruits and veggies do have most of them. But if I'm looking at vitamin E health, it's a super antioxidant. It's a super anti-inflammatory. Works great for the immune system. Helps the skin. Really helps the brain. I'm going to get into that one here in a little bit. Helps great in heart health. Also helps prevent sunburn. If I'm deficient in vitamin E, I'm going to have some nerve damage, maybe some muscle damage. I'm going to have issues with being able to control, being able to feel things. Major problem, coordination, speech issues, reflexes, peripheral neuropathies. There's a lot of issues when you're deficient in vitamin E because it's used so many different places. But, hang on, that's what I want. If I get too much vitamin E, yeah, possible, but it's generally considered non-toxic. Our bodies get rid of it. It uses up what it wants and gets rid of the rest. It doesn't save it around for anything. If you do happen to get too much at one time, maybe you might have a little fatigue, some headaches, maybe a little vision issues, some rashes, some blood thinning. And blood thinning is an issue probably more with vitamin K. Hopefully I'll get a chance to talk about that because we're running out of time. But with vitamin E, if I may have an increased risk of stroke and some blood issues. It's best taken with essential fatty acids, manganese, selenium, and your vitamins A, B1, and C. But here's the one thing that I really pass on when I'm speaking about vitamin E. One of the tocotrienols, there's 4 tocopherols, 4 tocotrienols, but the alpha tocotrienol is a specific molecule of vitamin E that activates what's called arteriogenesis in the brain. So let's say that I have a strike, an ischemic attack. I have a blockage in my brain that is now not going to allow oxygen and blood to flow through my brain. Well, the alpha tocotrienol turns on the switch and it opens up blood vessels, the vascular system around that particular blockage. And in most cases, literally almost 100% of the cases, the blood flow never stops flowing. You don't have an absence of that oxygen to the brain to cause problems. So we know that if I have a problem on this side, it's going to affect my left side of my body. Well, you end up with enough alpha tocotrienol, the body's protecting itself with this opening vessels to let the blood shut off from where the blockage is. I recover from my stroke, but I probably might not have any, I'm serious, any symptoms whatsoever of a heart attack or stroke with that particular chemical in my brain. So with that, I'm up to vitamin K, and I'm going to leave it there because that's one that I really want to talk about a lot. So let's go ahead and see if I can get to the end of this one here. Okay, some of the ones we're going to be talking about here next week. Okay. We're on the Talking Heads. The archive is found on YouTube. Go to USA Global TV playlist Talking Heads, and you'll be able to find my previous presentations. Talk a lot about heart health, brain health, gut health. We just finished a thing on toxins and stress. We did I think, a really super good job on cancer, fat management, weight management, two different animals. Talking about that. I really specialize a lot in longevity. I look for what causes us to age, what stops the aging process, a lot of lifestyle choices, a lot of things there that help us do what we do. Uh, if you want to know more about it, and I wonder what happened to that one today. There we go. That's the one I ended up with an extra slide in there. The Joy of Ageless Health is a book that I wrote. It's one of my best-selling books. And it talks about your stress and your toxins, your radiation, inflammation, infection, diet, and even expectations at the cellular level in the body. These are the things that inflammation, chronic low level, begins the mutation of our DNA, which begins the genesis of literally almost every disease in the body. We can control the cellular level inflammation. You can probably control a lot of diseases that may develop over time. With that, I'm going to leave it. I have other books on my website, red.olaughlin.com, and on Amazon. Please check me out. And with that, I will catch you next week on Talking Heads. Take care, y'all. Bye now.